So, my name is Hankus Netsky. I teach at the Global Musician Workshop, and I also teach Eastern European Jewish music, Jewish ethnic musical traditions at New England Conservatory, where I'm chair of contemporary improvisation, co-chair of contemporary improvisation, and we do all kinds of music from all over the world, along with composition and improvisation. And when I say Eastern European Jewish ethnic musical traditions, I'm talking about klezmer, which is the music of the folk professional instrumentalist. I'm talking about Hasidic music, which is ecstatic religious music. I'm talking about cantorial, which is a side of the liturgical music, really the modal improvisation world. And I also teach Yiddish theater music as part of that. And Yiddish theater music is a style that emerged that kind of brings, it's kind of a hybrid pop style that brings in all of the other elements into it, along with also Yiddish folk song, which is another very important tradition of Eastern European Jewish music. Now, all of these traditions are related to other Eastern European traditional kinds of music, especially Turkish and Romanian, I would say. But they were transformed over a period of 1,000 years when the Jews lived in Eastern Europe, and these styles all emerged. So they're really kind of offshoots in a way. And I teach all of these kinds of music really as a living, virtuosic, artistic musical tradition. And it's funny, in a lot of kinds of music, you wouldn't need to say that. You would just kind of say, I teach Chinese music like Wuman does, or I teach, you know, I come from 800 years of griots and I teach Mande, West African music. In Jewish music, it's a little different. The music that I teach is really for the whole world. And I know that because I perform. When I perform, I've performed for 10,000 people with Itzhak Perlman. I've performed with huge audiences with Theodor Bickel. But these are very, very international audiences, and there's a real international community engaged in this music. As for the Jewish community, sometimes when I teach at workshops for the Jewish community, people give me a hard time about this, I have to say. You know, things like the Jews have moved on. You know, they don't do this anymore. Eastern European Jews are political reactionaries. Okay, either that or they're communists. You kind of choose one or the other. Or it's so exclusionary. How can you teach Jewish music and only teach one kind? Or no one under 80 would possibly be interested in anything like that. Okay, things like this. So there's a lot of reasons. And you know, it's funny. I find that for me, you know, it seemed very natural. On my mother's side, I come from 4 generations of wedding musicians, and the piece I played was a very typical, what we call a bolgar, that probably all 4 generations of my family have played in Philadelphia. Huge group of klezmorim, of Eastern European Jewish wedding musicians, kind of amalgamated in Philadelphia and shared their repertoire. And this tune would be identified very much with Philadelphia. And my family got there at the turn of the 20th century, so they were there for quite a while. That's my mother's side. On my father's side, they were in what we call the schmata business, so basically recycling rags and sorting rags. And eventually that became upholstery supplies. But still there were all these Eastern European refugees that worked with my father. The lingua franca was basically Yiddish in that place. So this was the perfect kind of combination, in a sense, to produce someone who, well, let's put it this way. It's like my parents didn't, when the Jews switched, when they basically said, we're going away from all these ghetto traditions, we're creating a completely new identity, I think my parents didn't get the memo, basically. So when I was growing up, there were sort of 2 things you could do with that new identity. I mean, my brothers kind of rejected the whole thing, which seemed fine. What I did was I said, I want the identity of my grandparents. And, the Jews lived in Eastern Europe, as I say, they lived in Europe for over 1,000 years. And they had a really unique cultural traditions of music, dance, theater, food. For some reason, they never switched the food. They just kept the food. But the other ones, they really replaced. And they replaced it very much with, they replaced it with a very different kind of contemporary culture that really kind of said goodbye to a lot of this. Now, I'll also say that the Jews came to America at the turn of the century. And starting in the 1880s, though, when Europe got a little less attractive, quite a bit less attractive. It had not been that attractive, actually, for them for quite a while. But it was really seen as a land of opportunity. And that first generation came over here, founded the Yiddish theater, institutions like that. But the second generation largely assimilated in many ways. They were allowed to be American. They became American. Then, of course, we have in the late 1930s, 1940s, we have Hitler's decimation of that entire Eastern European Jewish community to a large extent. And then we have Jewish education, and Jewish education was very much about erasing all of the traces of what they called ghetto culture. So this was seen as something that was a lower class kind of culture, and that the Jews should aspire to something else at that point. So for me, growing up, it seemed to me like Jewish music and Jewish culture were in some sort of display case. It was the thing you weren't supposed to do, It was look, but don't touch. And it was exciting. I mean, again, I'd see my uncles, 4 of my uncles and my grandfather play at a wedding or a bar mitzvah or a club that had Jewish music. But they didn't really train me to do that because, to them it was like this was dying out and this is not what you were supposed to do, to teach somebody young to do this. You'd starve, as one of my uncles said. The cantor was always a wonderful source at my synagogue, and I sought them out and I sang in choirs. Hasidim were around in my neighborhood. I took my Hebrew school class to a Hasidic synagogue once. And basically, I also tried to learn Yiddish, and I started learning Yiddish even in high school. That was the language of the Eastern European Jews. So I was very interested in all of this, but it seemed like there was no way it could really become the thing that I would do. First of all, I wasn't a singer, so I wasn't going to become a cantor. And I didn't really know the instrumental tradition. So I immersed myself in music, and I was lucky enough to live in a largely African-American neighborhood. So my heroes, especially, I just remember in junior high, the first band I played with was a Ramsey Lewis cover band. And all the people in the band could play all the instruments, which inspired me to play a lot of instruments also. But my heroes were people like Maceo Parker, the sax player with James Brown. I tried to play like him. Frank Zappa, Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, um, Fats Waller. I mean, I loved old jazz, and I tried to play that. I also loved Bach and Beethoven, and I bought every None Such Explorer record of world music as soon as it came out. And when I was 17, I enrolled in music school to study composition and oboe, and I taught at a summer music camp. And the summer music camp was amazing. I'm still in touch with so many people. I hope some of them are watching out there today. But there was something happened there that actually really affected me, and it really was pivotal to my kind of deciding that this really had to be something I would do. I remember production. It was Brecht on Brecht. There was a wonderful drama teacher who did this with the faculty. Her name was Kate Schaffmaster, and she did this play, and I remember at the end of the play, there was a line that was something like, "I feel like a person who carries a brick around to tell the world what his house was like." And I just remember just kind of falling apart when I heard that line and thinking that that's what I had to do, that I was carrying a brick around, and I needed to learn more. I needed to really figure out how to do that, how to show the world what this was. And so I started a journey toward this music. And my cantor helped me get started. You know, I knew from the very beginning that cantorial music was something kind of amazing. It was really, you know, it was something that it sounded so mysterious in a way. And you know, the cantors would be so emotional. They were just about crying when they would sing. And that was very interesting to me. I started trying to figure out how to play this stuff on my oboe, and you know, I thought that might be a good place to go. Actually, right now, maybe I'll go to my oboe and play you something from one of my teachers. I was very, very honored late in my life to meet Ben-Sion Schenker, who was a fantastic, probably the greatest composer of the 20th century in the Hasidic community, or the late 20th century anyway, in the Hasidic community. And he was very generous with me and shared his life story, which is available on the Yiddish Book Center website, by the way. I do a lot of oral histories for the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst. And he also shared his music. And so I'm going to play my version of one of the pieces that he recorded. Probably didn't even know he was recording it. He just knew he was praying. He was leading a service. And it's a salachnu. It's a confessional. It's basically a prayer where you're basically saying, forgive me for whatever I've done. And I'm going to play this on oboe, and I think what you'll hear is that relationship to these other Eastern European traditions. It's really what he would sing always struck me as very similar to what I'd hear at a Greek restaurant. You know, I didn't hear my uncles playing stuff like this, but I would really hear it from Greek and Turkish players, what they call a taksim. So I'm going to do that for you on oboe. Let me just move over to the oboe section of the room. Okay. So the oboe is a very expressive instrument, and I didn't really play clarinet all that well. So my first instinct was to do this stuff on oboe. So this confessional prayer, as I say, is called Salachnu, forgive us. Let's see if the reed works. That's interesting. Better squeeze it. There we go. envelope, I'm trying to emulate the cry of the Eastern European cantor. And I hope that came through somewhat. I've got a very strange contraption that I'm trying to play with because I'm playing solo, which is an electric keyboard with some wooden pedals on it, which got a little stuck there, but I think you get the drift of what I was trying to say with that piece. It's really a cry, you know, these cantorials, and they're just so emotional, and that's really what they are. I mean, they really are a way of crying, a way of they're so expressive and so emotional, and they really hit me. So, as I said, my cantor helped me get started, and he played me examples from all over the place of all kinds of Jewish music. But really, you know, it didn't connect for me until I met my Uncle Sam. Now, when I went to the cantor, I was probably 18, looking, as I said, for some way of doing this. And then when I was 19, which would have been for me, let's see, I'm not good at math, but I think it would have been 1974. And my Uncle Sam really was the bridge. As I said, I already had worked on learning Yiddish. But what my Uncle Sam had that was kind of amazing, you know, well, if you turned on Jewish radio around then, you know, you'd hear Jewish music. But again, it felt like it was nostalgia. It did not feel like, as I said before, a living, virtuosic, artistic musical tradition. It felt like people kind of remembering back on something, but maybe covering it with a little bit of vinyl siding and plastic slipcovers. And meeting my Uncle Sam was different. He really was the bridge because he had my great-grandfather's record collection, which had Yiddish theater and Yiddish folk and cantorials and all of the music of the great klezmorim. He just loved klezmer. He was what they call a batchen, a wedding entertainer, a folk poet, my great-grandfather. And he had been in the Yiddish theater in Lemberg. When he came to Philadelphia, he never really left Eastern Europe. He just stayed in Eastern Europe as best he could, playing these records on his Victrola. And so it really was a bridge to this abandoned world. And that really became the wellspring. But the question, of course, is what do you do with that? You know, what do you do with all that? And I really couldn't figure out how to make something happen with this until I went to an Irish session, actually. And I was on vacation in Philadelphia. Two of my friends, one from camp and one from a Brazilian student of mine, kind of said, "Hey, are you busy? You got to go to this session. You got to see." And I'd never been to one. You know, I'd never been to an Irish session. It was at the home of Mick Maloney, who was living in Philadelphia at the time. And in one room they were playing penny whistles. Another room they were playing fiddles. Another room they were doing sea shanties. And you know, and everywhere there was food and drink. And I thought to myself, oh, that's how you revive a culture. Now, I had no idea. I thought Irish people, in fact, had that culture all along, and it was very much a living thing. And I didn't know that Mick Maloney was an activist, that Mick Maloney was doing this, really having really kind of spearheaded a whole revival of this music. But, you know, that wasn't so important to know. It was just important to feel it and feel like this is how you do it. And so I went to back up to Boston, and I put up a sign and I put an ad in a newspaper. That's the old internet. That's what we used to do. And some people came to jam on the tunes that I taught them from my grandfather's record collection, great-grandfather's record collection. And eventually, 1980, that jam band gave their first concert. We were at New England Conservatory. We were meeting at New England Conservatory, and I was teaching there since 1978. So I decided to call the band the Klezmer Conservatory Band, which I thought was a nice joke. People liked the title, actually. And soon we were playing all over the country. We were playing for colleges at colleges. We were playing at the Philadelphia Folk Festival. We're playing in folk festivals all over. We're playing soon, you know, not long after, we recorded our first LP. We made 10 more recordings with that band. That band is still going strong. Somewhere along the line, 1995, we met Itzhak Perlman, and he kind of made us his house band for several projects. One of his house bands for In the Fiddler's House, and then working on a cantorial and Hasidic project for Itchy Mayor Helfgott, a great cantor. We ended up touring with him quite a bit with that, most recently only last January. I also got to play with Theodore Bickel, who was one of my heroes, Joel Gray, who was one of my heroes. It looks like they're having trouble with the video. What do I do? Oh no. I don't know what this is about. Okay. Well, it could be that it's still doing the video, but not showing me the video. So I will assume that that's happening. Is that true? Maybe somebody could send me a comment that says that everything is okay. Yeah, if somebody could do that, that would be fantastic. Okay, I'm just looking here. Wow. All right, well, I will just go on, and they know my phone number if they need to call. So the question really, I think, is how do you learn this music if you want to learn this music? Because there are still mentors around. I just want to say that. That's one thing you should know. And so just last week, for example, for the Yiddish Book Center, I interviewed several people who had been on Yiddish radio in the 1940s and 50s. So these people are there, these sources. If you want to learn from Hasidim, you can find them, and they'll share their music. There's a lot of music that's available. You have to really sift through it to find the stuff that you want. Cantors still know traditional, what they call nusach, which are the prayer melodies, the improvisational tradition. And Yiddish art song is another tradition. You can learn these things. You can go out and learn these things, and you can listen. And one of the most important things for me in teaching music has always been the idea of listening in a detailed way. Don't get bogged down by the notes. You want to find all of the good stuff, like what is really happening in how the people are playing. How are they expressing their emotions? How are they expressing the feelings in the music? What are the signifiers of the music? What are the things that make this music different from any other music? I mean, that's very important. So I want to just say that I've enjoyed teaching this music for years at Global Musician Workshop, and it's just something that I just love being in that position to teach people this tradition that's so important to me. And whenever anybody gives you a hard time with it, just say that this music is a living, virtuosic, artistic musical tradition. You don't have to deal with politics. You won't have to deal with anything about something being out of touch, because Bach's never going to go out of style, Beethoven's never going to go out of style, and klezmer and Yiddish music are never going to go out of style. That's the level they're on. So maybe I'll just play some more music at this point, and then I'll look at the comments or questions. So let's do that. So what I'll do is I'm gonna play two short pieces. One thing I want to do is just show you how this works as an improvisational tradition. So I'll take a Yiddish theater tune and play it kind of straight as a Yiddish theater tune, and then I'll do a little improvising on it. And what I love about this is if you know Jewish improvisation, you can really take it in an improvisational direction, especially on Yiddish theater tunes, because they have all these elements of the music built into them. And so if you know the improvisational tradition, you can really use that. So here we go. This is a tune called Es fällt dir die Rosenke, which was done by Molly Pickin, a great star in the Yiddish theater and later on the Broadway stage. And it means, it literally means she's missing the raisin, but Molly translated it as she ain't got that thing. So that's a little bit of an improvisation on a Yiddish theater song. And I thought the last tune I would play, I'm going to go back to the repertoire of Ben-Zion Schenker. You know, some of you might have heard yesterday when Eduardo was talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter. And, you know, one of the things that really inspired me was when I saw Chabad women marching down Eastern Parkway for this cause, that it had reached that level, and that they felt that they could not help but speak out on this issue. And so what it made me think of in relation to Jewish music was a very beautiful, what we call Pischuli, a setting of Psalm 118, which says, "Open the gates of righteousness that we can enter." And this was done by Ben-Zion Schenker very much at the end of his life. It's on his last recording, very last recording, which I think is only available on his website, pretty much. And what he wanted to depict in his setting of these verses from the Hallel, from the, you know, from these hymns of praise, was he wanted to depict the Jews leaving Egypt at the time of the Passover Seder, you know, in the way that they're depicted in the Passover Seder, going at night, covered in clouds, not having any idea what was ahead, not having any idea what would happen, but just having that faith to go out there on this journey. And he really tried to capture the spirit of that in this version of Pischuli. So I just thought in these incredibly uncertain times, this would be a perfect kind of piece to play. So Pischuli Sharet Tzedek in a setting by Ben-Zion Schenker. So I wanted to, of course, open it all up for questions. If there are any questions, looking at the comments here. Let me see what it says. Let's see, are they? Oh, okay. So Priscilla Mendez asks, "Hi, how do you learn to develop these wonderful musical ideas? I always feel stuck when I try to come up with my own." Well, here's the thing. It's actually fairly simple. First of all, you have to know the piece that you're working with. So every piece of music is going to have certain material. Obviously, Beethoven came up at some point with ba 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 ba, but he didn't stop there, right? Ba 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 ba. Ugh, that was terrible. Okay, but you get the idea. And later on, ba 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 bum, ba 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 bum, ba 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 bum, ba 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 bum, etc. So I mean, you develop the idea. So the idea is really what you want to focus on. And the question is, can you do that? Do you know a way to do that? So if I'm taking something like the tune I was playing before, ba 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 da ba da dun 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 ba da ba da dun dun. So that could also go da ba da 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 da. It could be a variation, or you could just develop it. Bo ba 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 da. It can change. You want to just use your natural creative intuitive instinct to develop things like that. That's really what I would suggest. So from Adam Gorchak, one of our Silk Road friends, what are some of your listening suggestions to people new to this style of music? Oh my God, that's wonderful. Definitely go out and get a Naftuli Brandwine compilation. I would recommend that first as a great one that came out on Rounder years ago. Dave Terrace compilation. These are the two greatest of the clarinetists, of the American clarinetists. If you're a fiddler, you want to get a record by maybe Abe Schwartz. And, if you're interested in Jewish folk song, I would suggest that you get anything put together by Ruth Rubin, especially her compilation called Jewish Life, the Old Country, which are field recordings of fantastic Eastern European Jewish singers that she recorded in the 1940s and 50s. I would suggest with Yiddish theater, anything by Aaron Lebedoff, or a compilation of Molly Pickin. You can really get the feeling of Yiddish theater. Hasidic music, I love Ben Sion Schenker. Sometimes the production is a problem, so I would actually recommend my favorite CD is put out by Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and that is called The Music of the Hasidim as Sung by the Hasidim. And that's, these are things that could really get you started in all of these musical genres. For cantorials, oh my God, there are so many things, but I would recommend something put together by Henry Sapoznik called Mysteries of the Sabbath, which I think is on the Shanachie label. So that was a great question. Thank you. Let's take a look at other questions. Leave your question in the comment box below. Okay. We might be getting to the end. I don't see other questions, but I'm going to look for other questions. Hey, from Eli Cohen, my old student, what advice do you have for someone who picked up playing the piano at age 6, but mostly guided by playing through chromatic notes of the piano, now in their 20s, interested? Oh, this is a different Eli Cohen, obviously. Eli Cohen I know is a drummer of the piano, and now in their 20s, interested in starting the violin or other string instrument. Could be on the cello. Oh, I love the cello. That's great. I would suggest that whatever you do, the most important thing is that you sing through your instrument. And that's actually very much the biggest thing that we teach in my program at NEC in contemporary improvisation, that Dizzy Gillespie used to say, if you can sing it, you can play it. And he didn't want to hear you play it if you couldn't sing it. And there you can really teach yourself the instrument in a way that echoes who you are and the feelings that you want to put out there. And I'll also say that, if it's Jewish music, it has to have a certain kind of Music has, as I said, signifiers, things that make it what it is. That's very important when you're teaching. And the big one in Jewish music, I always thought, was this gesture. And all of my GMW friends know that that's what I do. If you're playing that music, you want it to have that da 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 da. Everything in Jewish culture has that as part of it. So that's a kind of feeling. So whatever music you're learning, you want to learn the gestures and you want to learn the language of that music, what it's trying to express and the way to express it. So that's what I would say, Eli. And, get in touch if you want and we can talk about it. I'm on Facebook. Let's see if there's any other ones. Let's look at the end here. Oh, thank you, Lewis. You liked that one. Wuman, great to see you. Let's see, anything else? Well, I miss you all so much, too. I'm getting a lot from my Silkroad students here. It's an incredible group of people. And let's just see. What did this say? Oh, Maurizio, best class ever. Just saying. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, we got greetings from Ashland, Oregon. Well, I love that Silkroad is making these community meetings available to the public. We've only done them before in rural Indiana, and they've been wonderful. But it's so great to be broadcasting them to the world. And I want to say that also, please go to the Silkroad website. Silkroad is really trying to help out musicians in this time and help out everybody in this time. And they're putting all this wonderful content out there also. And stay safe. We'll all get through this together. Thank you so much. It's been great being part of this wonderful, wonderful faculty. And I hope that we'll all get to do it live at New England Conservatory next summer. So see you soon. Take care. Bye.